Son Goku Jr. is a controversial character, with some finding his presence as tacked on, and others finding him to perfectly encapsulate Dragon Ball's themes. I stand somewhere in the middle of acknowledging the great ideas behind him, but seeing flaws in the execution. So today I'll outline my thoughts on him. The good aspects of Goku Jr.'s placement have already been covered by Jordan the Dragon Lee, so I won't retread what he said too much. If wanting the TLDW, the short answer is the original Goku's tutelage of his descendant on Mount Paozu hammers in that his arc has come full circle, and that Goku Jr. gaining the wish through his character overcoming hardships ties things back to the original intent of the Dragon Balls as a reward to the worthy, as elaborated on by Kami soon after his introduction, reinforced in the Frieza arc, and made even more overt in Super. I'd add that this scene is even better with knowledge of GT's ending, that most in the West would have had before watching the TV special, as it's made apparent in GT's last few episodes that the Dragon Team must resolve to improve and protect Earth by their own power rather than relying on the Dragon Balls. And Goku leaving the Budokai grounds after seeing most of his and Vegeta's descendant fight each other shows he considers the next generation to be on the right track, and for he and the Dragon Ball story centers around him to exit the stage. Though this works thematically, there are elements of Goku Jr.'s characterization that make it apparent why many don't care for him. When I describe someone as a descendant of Goku who is instead meek and weak, before learning to utilize the great dormant power within them to protect those they care for, and be a worthy successor to Goku. Can you tell if I'm referring to Goku Jr. or Saiyan arc Gohan, with a pinch of his Cell arc self for the last point? It is difficult to say Goku Jr. works well in execution when the runtime of the special ultimately makes him a watered down Gohan in terms of character growth. Though his characterization isn't worthless, the setting of the special's first act provides a different take on what's essentially a look at what if Gohan went to school and had social interactions with children his age before unlocking his dormant ki. Or, funnily enough, what if the setting of Dragon Ball Evolution's first act wasn't the epitome of generic Hollywood teen fantasy stories? The Goku within him appears in his lack of balance in his initial scenes, in much the same way Goku's lack of temper in his skills could hold his child and teenage self back, compared to the martial artist he became as an adult, but showing how important his genetics and his lifestyle was in bringing out the ki necessary for him to be as strong as he was in Dragon Ball's early arcs, whereas Goku Jr.'s Saiyan blood is too diluted to rely on for strength naturally, and him having grown up in the comforts of the city as opposed to his namesake living a childhood in line with the Tao. His initial motivation for getting stronger also helps show why it is more difficult for him to ascend beyond the strength of a regular boy, when its self-serving purpose being against the Budo principles Muten Roshi instilled in Goku and Kuririn, and highlights Dragon Ball's idea of true strength being moulded by both conflict and inner peace. The perfect example of this is with Goten and Trunks, living in a peaceful environment, but with a genuine desire for self-improvement to help bring their potential out very naturally, which, coupled with what Toriyama has said of S-cells, being why they were able to naturally far surpass what strength future Trunks gained from the hardships of his timeline. The most innovative aspect of Goku Jr. is his path to become the Super Saiyan, being a gradual utilization of this hidden genetic trait rather than only being capable of being used when fully unlocked, which highlights how the Super Saiyan state is ultimately a genetic mutation, and thereby has changed in its utilization by someone whose percentage of Saiyan DNA is far different from the main cast of Z and GT, something reinforced in more recent material, with both the S-cell elaboration, as well as how Gohan's beast form is essentially the evolution of his Saiyan and Earthling genetics. Its utilization in the plot isn't as good, with it acting as a deus ex machina whenever Goku Jr. is in trouble, but it at least works to some extent in relation to his genetic component. particularly the Darwinistic aspects of Super Saiyan, often being achieved in desperate survival situations, or as a result of great genes. This also ties into the themes of his story and the focus on his need to become courageous, with it being further tapped into and eventually unlocked the more times he achieves courage, or, in terms of ki cultivation, increases his Yuki. It's in GT's final episode that we see the main narrative purpose of Goku Jr., with his experiences having moulded him to have his ancestors' Budo principles, and his focus on upholding his ancestral traditions hammer in that, much as Goku was forced to take on Buu due to the flaws of Gohan and Gotenks, whereas the Earth was fine for nearly a century under the protection of a generation that had grown to emulate Goku's mindset. The Earth would be fine as long as it had those with the same Budo mindset and ideals as Goku to protect it, and why, despite the potential for further storytelling, there was no need for the anime to go further than GT's final episode, and why it was declared as the end of the Dragon Ball story. In much the same way the note the original manga ended on made it the perfect ending for its own continuity, as I've gone into before. Overall, despite being the least interesting character amongst those of the Son family and Bardock's lineage, as well as the rushed aspects of his story, Goku Jr. presents himself as more than a cash grab of reusing Goku's image, unlike some others, to act as an encapsulation of many of the core ideas of the Dragon Ball story that came before him. Thank you if haven't watched until the end, and a special thank you to Rod the Digger for recommending the topic of this video. If you have a Dragon Ball topic of your own, perhaps mention it in the comments, and if wanting to see more to do with the ideas linked to GT's final episode, maybe check out this video here.